Hey friends, all right, we're going to do a little new moon video here. We've got our new moon tomorrow on May 4th. May the 4th be with you. This is actually funny. I was writing notes and I realized May the 4th be with you, the Star Wars kind of holiday, I guess, May 4th. Fits perfectly the themes in Star Wars. You have a brother and a sister and parents and things go awry and dad goes to the dark side and they don't know he's their dad and he's got this whole other identity. So like goes perfectly with this new moon, which is a fun little synchronicity. All right, so if you're going to follow along with me, the easiest way to do this would be, if you're familiar with astro.com, go to their website, go to extended chart selection. You're going to grab you're going to have to build a chart yourself. Go ahead and put in May 4th, 2019, and select unknown time. The city doesn't really matter because without time, we're not going to have houses, okay? We're going to just look at this from a purely sort of sign and then planetary aspect perspective to simplify it, because we're going to look at the tropical and the draconic. So pull up a draconic too. You need both. And then I'm going to talk with you guys about what I call a deep chart. So it's a whole separate, this is where it's the key. Your tropical chart will show you the sort of apparent externalized things that are happening in the world around you. Remember, astrology is not causal, so it's not like you're being forced. You know, transits are just like a person who walks up and knocks on your door or throws a rock at your house from across the street or whatever, right? It's an external, outside sort of activity or force, if you want to say, or happening. Now, the draconic chart is created, it's a hypothetical chart. All of the planets are going to stay in their same relationship to one another. So like the geometry, the aspects you see in the middle will look the same. They'll just be spun. They'll be usually in a different position. And with a draconic chart, we're spinning that dial of the zodiac, okay? The sun's ecliptic. And we're putting 0 degrees of Aries at the north node. So that means the north node will be right on the ascendant, okay? In this, when we have unknown time. So what is the draconic chart? Now, draconic charts are fascinating. You should take a look at your own. It's going to show you, in my mind, deeper sort of inner workings, things that are happening also that have been building up over time. Because the nodes of the moon always have to do with, as a group, as a collective, as a generation, even a little micro generation, like, you know, it's going to show what we've been coming from and dealing with. And this year, because we've got our nodes, south nodes in Capricorn and north nodes in Cancer, we're moving towards Cancer. We're moving towards the inner knowingness, the inner sense of safety and security. We're dealing with family issues this year. And in particular, this month and since the beginning of the year, we've been dealing with romantic delusions or fantasies or relationships falling apart or us trying to make something happen. I'm going to fit this square peg into this round hole and I'm going to make it work, you know. And some other people have been really happy, but then they're sort of realizing that maybe what they were seeing in each other, they weren't really seeing each other for the individual, but rather both parties were trying to be the thing that they thought the other person wanted. And at the end of the day, that's exhausting and it's not honest, right? So it's a way of hiding your inner self and your inner child, which brings me to, when you're looking at a new moon, the new moon as a symbol, we have a day, when it's exact anyway, where the moon transits the sun. And this particular new moon, I think we've got like a 9 and a 10 degree in the declinations, if I'm remembering correctly. So it's not only longitudinally, which is like, okay, let's pretend like I could use my mirror, but that won't really work. I'll use my little powder. All right. So imagine, I'm going to set it sideways because, you know, pretend like this is the plane of the solar system and we have this planets moving around and my camera is all backwards, so, you know. But point is, the planets not only come to meet each other, just like when you're driving up and then you're right next to someone, or I should do it like that, right? And then you're next to them and then you pass them. You just transited them. But you also, if we had airplanes or flying cars, you could be at different declinations to one another. And each planet has a maximum north and south declination. So anyway, that's another way of looking at their relationship to each other, just making it more complicated. But when you have them both conjunct one another, but also, you know, close to one another, then of course this tells us it's almost like an eclipse, right? And it is that something that we're sort of experiencing. It's not an eclipse, but point being, significant new moon. And okay, so I'm so excited to get into this with you guys. Now, first of all, I was trying to think of how to break this down. When I read charts, it's very visual, and so I go in, the very helpful tip with reading, have an entrance point, okay? So with the new moon chart, our entrance point is we want to know, just distill it down to the simplest, what's happening with the moon. Oh, okay, well, when we have a new moon, as I was just saying, pretend like I'm going to be the sun. Well, this isn't a very good metaphor. I was going to say I'm a car, and this is a car, and this is the sun, and if I drove in front of this car, you'd see me. But let's imagine that they're like both, I don't know, this is a camouflage car. Or this is the sun, and this is the moon. All right, and so as the moon comes relative to us here on Earth, we see it's us, and then there's the moon, and then the sun. So we can't see the moon because the sun's so bright. And we have a new moon, the sun and the moon are together. It's like they're married. Like I've said before, it's like I think of the solar principle, the sun, as the inner child, the identity, but it's also a bit tied into the masculine, like the father or the husband. It's the man's creative principles, it's sort of the masculine inner child, but as a creative force, okay, which then creates a child along with the mother. But there's this element of the moon is not seen. So when we have a new moon, this is a time of the consciousness has to do more so with that which is visible, right? That which we can see because it's the sun. And at nighttime we have a black night, no moon. So this can be one of those times when we can see things that we haven't recognized before. And there's been some things happening this past 2 weeks as well. A lot of people this last week, especially in relationships, have seen where they've had patterns that have stemmed from their childhood. Okay, and I don't want to jump ahead of myself here, but let's kind of sort of get into this here, and I want to make a note. I use these symbols that are called the Chandra symbols, and they're like the Sabian symbols. I just prefer the Chandra symbols. I just think that I don't love all of them, but most of them I like better. And it's from a book called Inside Degrees by Elias Lonsdale. You can buy it online. It's a fabulous reference book, and it's incredibly uncanny how the symbols, just via synchronicity, will help you have some imagery and help you see the planets in a new way. Okay, so if you're really wanting to learn astrology too, drawing charts, hand drawing them, my Mercury in Virgo's opinion, hand drawing them, coloring them in, writing your own words, for what you feel each of the planets symbolize, just a simple word, and then seeing how they interact and dance with each other, right? Okay, so when you have the sun, the solar principle, it's shining so brightly that the moon is being ignored, which tells us it's not usually an emotional time. It's not a time of like werewolf city, like a full moon, where we have this stuff coming up and we don't know where it's coming from and we feel a little bit out of control, or we can feel, like we're crying a lot. Now you might be crying because this is a particularly potent new moon because it's tied into the archetypes that are foundational. The male principle, the female principle, the mother principle, the father principle, right? It's the basic building blocks of our psychology. Okay, so let's look first. We're going to look at the tropical and the draconic, as well as then I'm going to show you the deep chart, just the sun and the moon. Okay, they're at the same degree. If you set your charts up using an unknown time, then your sun and moon, the moon's not exactly conjunct the sun yet. The time won't be exactly right, of course. So pretend like they're both in the tropical, like 14 degrees of Taurus, right? So smack dab in the middle, pretty much, of Taurus. Now, Taurus is an archetype that has to do with, it's the second archetype. It's the second. You think of the zodiac, it is a process, an additive process of progression. Psychological progression, physical growth, physical progression, anything that is born and then dies, including the earth, because it will one day die. We just don't know when. So, okay. So Taurus is a sign that has to do with maintaining the conditions that have been set, okay? Aries is this, let's pretend like we're going to make a baby, because that's fun, right? So Aries would be the part of that process that has to do with the physical attraction between two people, the fire, the passion, and that desire, to have sex, to make love, and perhaps to want to make a baby, or perhaps just because they want to do it, right? So it comes from this biological, instinctive, reactive, or reflexive part of us. It's not something you It's like, if, for example, if you were homosexual instead of straight, like you just naturally are attracted to and have a fire for people of the same sex, right? So it's not something you control up here. It's just inherent, it's part of who you are. Okay. So Aries starts things. Taurus, on the other hand, if we imagine Aries is the lovemaking, it's the fun time, the action, the friction. Taurus is then the fact that, first of all, both the gametes, the sperm and the egg, they're holding awesome, incredible material in both of them, right? And they each carry half of, each parent's genetic information. They're going to come together, and then you have Gemini. Things are going to recombine. So think of Taurus as, where in my life have I been holding on to something? Where am I stuck? That's like the negative expression of Taurus, right? Today, I was working on my mechanical pencil, and the lead got stuck on the end of it. I couldn't get it out, and I was like, oh, and I was like stabbing it, and anyway, I gave up. Used a colored pencil. The point is, where in your life do you think of this as well as like an acorn? You know how hard an acorn is? If you ever try to break one open just to get that soft nut that's inside of it, it's hard. That's Taurus. That's Taurus energy. Taurus is also, I use Ceres as the ruler of Taurus. I do not use Venus. If you use Venus, that's fine. I use Ceres, okay? And here's why. The archetype of Ceres to me has to do with, she's the mother of, if you think of the myth that has to do with Persephone, I forget, I sometimes get I get my Greek and my Roman myths, their names mixed up, but it has to do with Pluto and Persephone and her getting taken by him basically for a part of the year underground. And her mother, Ceres, is the one who makes the deal basically. She is the goddess of the grain. So I think of her as, think of like your grain silos. What do you keep to be prepared for a rainy day? That's Taurus-y stuff, which is important, right? But there can also be times where we overstay old relationship patterns because it's safe, because it's what you know, but you're not evolving and growing. So we need Gemini then, recombination of information, variation, words, language, understanding to help us, boredom, to help us break out of habits or patterns that are not serving us anymore. So what does that mean for a sun? That means that this is a day when the sun is in Taurus. It's a day that has to do with, where have you held on for security in your life? And there's a deeper layer to this. I haven't even talked about what kind of security, right? If you look at the tropical, you'll see there's a lot of, you got Aries, you have Chiron, okay? Venus, Mercury, all in Aries. So the wonderful part about these planets, Chiron in Aries says, I'm ready for fresh new healing. I think of Chiron as it's about repair. So I use Chiron as a ruler of Virgo. How are you applying yourself to learn a new skill? How are you fixing something in your own life? And in this case, with it in Aries, it can be tied directly to the male principle. So for men, how has your inner male principle, maybe as a boy, been wounded? How is it that you need to work on healing that part of yourself? And we receive these wounds as children. A lot of times if you go back, if you've seen Alice in Wonderland, the Looking Glass version, right? If you remember the scene with the Mad Hatter and he's a little boy with his dad. I cried today watching this. He's with his dad and he makes this really cool little miniature, little beautiful butterflied hat, blue butterflies. And his dad sees it and his dad just kind of makes a negative comment about the hat. Like, that's not a hat. That's not a real hat, and throws it in the garbage can. But what little Mad Hatter doesn't see is his dad, because he's able to time travel later, or no, Alice sees it. She sees his dad take it back out of the trash, and he smiles and he saves it. So sometimes parents do things thinking they're using tough love or whatever, right? But it gets stuck inside of Taurus, right? It gets stuck inside of us as a truth. And many times these are things that are very small, quick little moments that we internalize and don't even remember. We could have just been watching mom and dad fight with each other. We may just have learned over time, like, dad cheated on mom, and mom was really sad all the time. And I don't want to end up being my dad. I don't want to end up being stuck in it because it's marriage that's done that to him, It's not that he's chosen that path of resentment towards his wife. And, you don't know the whole backstory. So when you're acting from a place that's unconscious, if you're being compulsive or addictive about something, guaranteed it comes from a deeper story. So Another way of thinking of this Taurus New Moon, besides it having to do with areas where we're feeling stuck, it's a new moon, so it's about a fresh start. Another example, I used to ride horses, and so you have all your tack, all your leather, and sometimes you'd have like a old pair of stirrup like leathers, and you'd put them in your tack trunk, and they'd be in there for like a year, and you'd go and get them out to use them, and they'd be stiff as heck, and like they would crack really easily and basically break, you know. So there's ways of soaking things you could do to your leather to soften it. So that's going to be what we talk about when we go into the deep chart, because we have a Virgo new moon. And it's at 19 degrees of Virgo, so it trines the new moon in the tropical chart. So it says there is some deep healing that we can do, but it takes work, and it takes sacrifice. It takes humility. It takes admitting where we were wrong. It takes coming clean. It takes also with yourself, forgiving yourself, recognizing your parts that are, scattered, recognizing where you've hurt yourself or where you've hurt other people from this inner child wound. Okay, so, all right, so coming back to the tropical, so we have this sun, bright sun, big, mellow, happy, calm, peaceful, Taurus-y sun, that really just, you think of a little child that's happy, that they haven't been wounded yet by life's little barbs. They just are, they're not self-conscious, they love everybody, they just want to play with everybody. They want to explore things. They're curious. When they draw a picture, they think it is like the best, most. Look at this. It's not. They don't even necessarily have a rating for it. That's not until like first grade when they have coloring contests in class, and you feel like your drawing was bad, but this other kid's was really amazing, and you start learning. Oh, I'm not good at that. Or at recess, I'm not very good at jumping rope because I trip over all the time. Like that's me. Or whatever it is. Or the kids in your neighborhood. This is me. We're very nice to you because you like to read a lot or like do things by yourself, and they thought you didn't like them. And anyway, so these things, when we're little, when we don't really understand what we're being handed, they're internalized. Okay, so what happens many times, we then grow up to be men and women or young men and women. We step into our Mars and Venus principles. This is what a man is, this is what a male is, and this is what a female is. All right, so think of all your gender stereotypes. By the way, whether you are straight, gay, transsexual, asexual, like wherever you're at on the spectrum, does not matter. We all have masculine, feminine, which are the masculine part of you is the part of you that's going to go out. It's going to initiate, take action. It's like what I was saying earlier about Aries, right? It's that desire, that spark that's going to start the fire, okay? The Venus principle, on the other hand, has to do with, first of all, Mars is instinctive. You're just kind of born with a certain Mars. You're fast, you're slow, whatever, that kind of thing, right? Venus, on the other hand, has to do with how you've learned socially to behave, how you've learned, like, whether people like you or not, and what you need to do socially, how you have to affect yourself in order to be liked by others. Like, I have a Venus that's in Virgo, which really kind of sucks, because it's very it's like, it's a very shy Venus placement, but I have other things in my chart that are really outgoing, so people think that I'm like really confident, but really I have a very like a perfectionistic side to me. So at any rate, when you think about these two principles, we have Venus is in Aries, so Venus is in her opposite sign in the tropical chart. Okay, Mars, though, on the other hand, is in the sign of Gemini. So Mars is kind of, this has been very, I'm going to just essentialize this and nutshell it really quick, okay? This last month has been one, in particular, in relationships, where you've had one person. It's always the person who's the one who's more invested, the one who needs the relationship more, who's opened themselves up more in a vulnerable way. But just because they're opening themselves up in a vulnerable way, or they're being very giving, it doesn't necessarily mean it's coming from the right place. It could be coming from a place of deep, deep wounding, where they glom onto someone to have an identity. That's not healthy. That's someone who needs to do a lot of inner work. And a lot of people who've been experiencing this, a lot of people who have had crushes on others, who are totally like rejecting them, or who are lying to them, who are using them and taking advantage even, because that person has an inner child story about the male-female principles that have to do with, if you're really nice to a woman, then she's going to want to marry you, and then you're going to get trapped like your dad, and then you're going to hurt your mom, and then you're going to be your dad, and then you're going to, so you're going to free and liberate your mom, metaphorically, free and liberate mom by just not even getting in that place in the first place, right? You don't want to hurt anyone. But the deeper story underneath This is what I always think about people who are labeled as being narcissists, is there's always just a child inside that is very sensitive and that has been conditioned by their family or their upbringing, to react to emotional material in a certain way because they experienced things as a child that were, many times as a very young child, that didn't make sense. Hypocrisy, do what I say, not what I do, all that stuff. Okay, so sun, moon together. You think of the moon as the lunar principle, it's the mother. And when the sun is shining brighter than the moon, that means the inner child is the part that's being presented. And the inner child's little box of treasures, and even little box of maybe memories that, if you watched Emily, the French movie, Amélie, when she finds that little box for, what was his name, I can't remember his name, it was like Brutado or something like that. I'm forgetting the first syllable of his name, but you know what I'm saying. She finds this little box under her inner wall, and it belongs to this man, and it's from his childhood. That's such a beautiful, another perfect kind of visualization of this new moon. What's in your little box, and have you looked at it in a while, and have you added things to it as an adult that maybe don't really need to, they're not true? Or maybe have you questioned, my dad threw away my little hat that I made as a child, or I had a grandpa who, I have a memory, I swear, that said, I drew this picture of a horse, and he said, that's not a horse, or something. It was a zebra. It wasn't supposed to be a horse, But, so my memory of it, but, maybe he was having a really bad day, or he was grumpy and old, maybe he was hurt, and he hadn't taken a nap, and, who knows, right? So, as an adult, we have that ability, because our Venus is developed, where we can sort of, hopefully, understand another person, where they're coming from. As a child, we don't. So we store that in our little box. And it becomes a part of our identity. Because that's formed when we're between, 5 and 11-ish, or maybe even a little bit younger. We learn whether people like us and why they like us, and if we measure up, and if we don't, that's your Saturn. So new moons, mom's being kind of ignored, basically, so that the child can be heard. It's like the child gets to speak up for a second and says, I'm going to make a new start, or, you said I don't know. It just feels like, with it being in Taurus, and then also ruled by, I use Ceres, a retrograde Ceres, going to the past, right, in Sagittarius. Patterns that we have, and it's in conjunct the new moon. Okay, so this says it's of particular importance that we are focusing on repairing our relationship to the truths that we hold on to, ruled by Jupiter and Sagittarius. So it's funny because people who are Sagittarius and Geminis, before the year started, people were saying, oh, it's going to be so great for you guys. And I'm looking at it going, oh, geez, because you've got Neptune squaring it all. Neptune's in there saying, is the story you're listening to and believing or thinking or telling? Sagittarius are going to be the ones that are going to be like, many times they're pretty easygoing, right? Oh, well, not always. Male Sagittarius are different from female. Male Sagittarius are easygoing. Female Sagittarius are a bit more competitive, but they both can be competitive. If they want something they've aimed for, they'll fight for it. But with the Neptune square, they're going to be affecting their behavior and pretending more that what they're pretending like this is what you want, so I'm going to be this thing that you want because I think it's what you're wanting from me. But maybe I'm not really getting my deeper emotional needs heard. I'm kind of rewounding my inner child. So this is a time of Jupiter saying, okay, is this your real truth? Like, here's what you believed, and here's what you just found out. Big old T-square, to the ruler, and Jupiter in Sagittarius tells us that's the final dispositor. It's retrograde. That's the ruler of this new moon. So it's this process of they're informing each other. And this new moon has to do with where we hold on to and get stuck believing truths that perhaps aren't true, but they're making us feel safe, so we hold on to it because it feels safe. What are patterns that we repeat over and over again that tie back into our childhood? Our relationship maybe with our mother in particular. Did our mother teach us things that had to do with being steady or being constant or holding on or being committed or being like sticking it out through situations or times where we shouldn't? Did our mother do something where we felt like she, whatever it is that you believe about your mom, good, bad, or ugly, or in between, whatever. Where do you hold on to something where you saw her looking for security? I don't know, being a gold digger, that she's single and she's like dating rich guys or something, or on and on and on. It depends. But the point is, how is it showing up now? How's it being externalized in your life? How are you trying to like do the opposite thing, or how are you repeating her same patterns with people you're dating? Are you treating women in a way where you're letting women who aren't treating you very well hang around? Are you also, the other really big thing is, are you worried about hurting someone when you know you need to end a relationship, but you're kind of like, this person's so sweet and I don't want to hurt them because they maybe remind you of mom. And then if you have to, whatever, have words with them, maybe you kind of feel like dad, and you kind of feel like, I'm going to be an asshole. Now, if you've been the guy who's been the dominant older partner, or the one that's like, like representing the father figure, there's a very good chance you have been playing a role, not intentionally necessarily, but you probably tapped right into this person's, their inner child wound, and you've been showing up for them in a way that's been like a parent, like the approving parent, giving them the love they never had, that kind of thing. So that has to be looked at and adjusted, because both in that situation, you'd have people, this is just what I've had from clients, people who are both working out their childhood issues in their romantic relationships, and they can't even see that they're doing it, like, at all. And so, in fact, I've had a few Sagittarius clients in particular, just because of where Jupiter and Neptune are at, they're kind of getting banged, and Gemini. My Gemini clients are starting to see, they're like seeing the light. They're the ones who in the past have been Jekyll and Hyde, and now they're like, oh, geez, I was Hyde. I was like the bad guy. Whether it's male or female, or I've been dishonest with people, or I've told them one thing but then wimped out and like done the other thing, or that type of stuff. So they're kind of having the little come to Jesus moment a little bit more, but because Jupiter's in Sagittarius, tends to give us a feeling like we're right, like we have the answers, or just let me help you, let me show you, let me take care of you. And I've seen this. I've got multiple friends too, male and female partners who are Sag, and it's just the pattern I've been seeing. So Sag is not seeing clearly, either not seeing clearly where this other person is at, or wanting to see what they want to see, or there's also been some Sagittarius who have not been very honest about their intentions. That's another really, really big one. It all goes back to their childhood story. What does that look like, right? If it's a male, what was his relationship like with his mom? Does he want to have a woman that he can just like, that will mother him, or that he can mother? Does he want to be a playboy? Does he want to just have someone he can be kind of like, what's that? I'm thinking of that movie, Boxing Helena, where the guy's obsessed with the girl, and he's like trying to make her into the Pygmalion, I guess is what I'm thinking. I'm trying to make her into this perfect woman. He has this vision for her, and he's trying to coach her, help her, but really he's not even seeing her. He's seeing his own projection onto her. So same thing with female Sagittarius. A lot of them are, Sag in general is just it's one of my very favorites. Like, I have dear Sagittarius male and female friends. You guys are the ones that, like, you're optimistic. Even if you're a Sag, it's more depressive. There's still this spirit to Sag where it's like they'll fight for something, or they'll go after it, or they'll, as a partner, they tend to be really good. If they want to be with you, they really will do things to try and make it, they're a fire sign, so they'll push. Especially with this Jupiter, because it's amping up ego, it's amping up confidence, it's amping up, I am right. Just listen to me. I've got the, this is going to work. It's going to be great if it's a business partner. So, big old T-square, Jupiter and Sag, square Neptune, right? And it's also right in the middle, of Pisces. And then forming a square over here to Mars and Gemini. So that's what we're believing, Jupiter, Jupiter and Sag. What we're doing might be a little different. Like, this is a weekend where decisions will be made. The other thing I noticed, tons of things at 22 degrees. And for some reason, that is a pivotal number. It's mathematical, I suppose. I haven't looked into it yet. But the number 22, the 22nd degree, when planets land there, it's like, okay, now we're going to do this or we're not going to do it. And there's an extra sense of urgency, So bear that in mind. If you're zigging and zagging and all over the place, and it's a great weekend to do some inner work. Relationship-wise, keep things lighter. It's more about working on you, okay? Now, let's talk about the Draconic chart. Let me see, I'm trying to think. Actually, let's do this in a better order. Let's do Mercury next. I was going to do this in dyads. I think I actually still will. Let's back up. We're going to start out. Let me have a drink of water, and then I might actually divide this in 2 parts. Okay, I'm going to stop right here, and we'll have a little part 2. So we're going to go through the dyads of all the planets and look at them through the 2 different charts, tropical and draconic. But stay with me, because I'm going to introduce the key to the deeper lesson on a very deep. It's where we marry the soul to the external sort of ego-based life, and it's going to help you with here to help you with individuation, just getting closer to your own true story. Okay, so come back.